Hi everyone, my name is Maria Delzat and I'm a registered dietitian and a mountain ultra trail runner for La Sportiva. I have a virtual private practice called Inspired Eating where I specialize in intuitive eating and health at every size, which helps people of all body shapes and sizes find compassionate ways to take care of themselves. There's no pursuit of weight loss or body manipulation. My sessions focus on intuitive eating strategies, behavior goals, shifts in mindset, and increased support while using a non-diet and weight-neutral lens. My intention for this presentation is to help you examine your own rhetoric around food and nutrition, to challenge your beliefs about how you define food and health, and help foster confidence in making your own decisions about your health. Oftentimes athletes or those of us who engage in high levels of physical activity are told that we're machines, and in order to be bigger, better, faster, stronger, we have to follow some particular calorie count or meal plan. But what happens is that this group of people is also susceptible to eating disorders and disordered eating. And so it's really important to practice interventions that not only honor our physical health, but also take care of our mental health as well. And the principles of intuitive eating help you understand your hunger and eating in a way that is nourishing and satisfying. Intuitive eating is a dynamic process that integrates attunement of mind, body, and food. And it helps facilitate normal eating behaviors. What do I mean by normal eating behaviors? I mean eating without food rules, not excluding things from your diet if there's not a medical necessity, not feeling guilt or shame around eating, not feeling preoccupied with food guilt or thinking about food all the time, being able to honor your hunger and feel your fullness without feeling anxiety. So I'm going to argue that I don't care how healthy that you think you eat or that you claim that you eat. If you have a challenging relationship with food in your body, not only will your mental health suffer, but your physical health will as well. You can think about your relationship with food like any other relationship you have with a partner, a spouse, a boyfriend, girlfriend, best friend. You don't work on that relationship for a month or two and be like, I think we're good, I don't think we need to talk anymore or communicate or check in with each other. Chances are if we had that attitude, our relationship wouldn't last the long run. And the same thing happens with our relationship with food. We have to constantly check in with ourselves and see, how are we doing? How are we feeling? Because especially as women, we have a different body every decade of our life. Think about it. How has your body changed since you were a teenager, to your 20s, to your 30s, to your 40s, to your 50s, and so on? We have to constantly be able to adapt to changes in our needs, changes in our tastes, and changes into how our body feels, how it feels to move in our body, and how food affects our body. And so I'm talking to you as not an expert of you, because nobody is an expert of your body except you. Only you know your likes and your dislikes. Only you have your career path, your spouse, your kids, your job obligations. And so it's not for me or anyone else to tell you what's right for you, because only you can be the expert of your body. What makes it so hard to have a positive, solid relationship with food right now is that there's so much information out there, so easily accessible at our fingertips, that it makes nutrition information confusing and conflicting and frustrating. And so many times I hear my clients just exhausted with the possibilities of, I don't know if I'm doing this right, or am I doing something wrong? And so really there's more harm than good being done. And so my hope is to help foster confidence in your decisions about health and wellness while navigating this world of diet culture. Now, diet culture is everywhere. What do I mean by diet culture? Diet culture is a system of beliefs that values thinness and equates health to moral virtue. Diet culture often promotes weight loss as a means of attaining higher status. It demonizes certain foods while elevating others. And it oppresses people who don't match up to this ideal standard of what this supposed picture of health is. Oftentimes oppressing women, the trans community, people of color, and those who live in bigger bodies. What happens is that once you start to notice diet culture, you can't unnotice it. It's everywhere. It's in the songs that we listen to. It's in between the songs that we listen to, in ads, on the radio, in magazines, as we scroll through our Instagram feeds and Facebook margins. It's everywhere. And diet culture, first of all, creates a lot of stress and anxiety around food. And oftentimes, this stress and anxiety that we feel around food can oftentimes manifest in actual physical symptoms. Because when we get nervous, we get a release of cortisol, and that cortisol can make our stomach feel nervous, and our nervous stomach can feel like irritable bowel syndrome. And rather than attributing it to, oh, I feel nervous, it's, oh, I just ate XYZ, that must be the problem, I must cut that out. And this elimination can be a slippery slope into disordered eating and eating disorders. There's also a lot of fear mongering out there. I haven't seen any new documentaries as of late, but for a while there were a handful of documentaries coming out on Netflix that had so much fear mongering to them. There were documentaries like Cowspiracy, What the Health, that further perpetuate disordered thoughts and beliefs around food. Right? They put up really scary, compelling, convincing arguments that can really play to people's vulnerabilities. Diet culture also decreases our satisfaction with food. There's this idea that in order to indulge, we have to somehow earn it, whether it's through hard work, vigorous activity, running a certain amount of miles. So there's so many times that I hear, oh, I've run X amount of miles today, I feel less guilt about eating this, or I give myself permission. So there's a lot of conditional rules that diet culture puts on us because we don't want to feel the guilt that's often coupled with it. There's also a lot of morality tied to food. How many times have we heard food described as this is good and this is bad? And what happens is that we are meaning-making creatures. And so under our conscious awareness, whether we realize it or not, when we eat this food that we have labeled bad, we feel like a bad person. And likewise, when we eat a food that we have labeled good, it makes us feel like a good person. And so it's one of my biggest, I'm very quick to stop people when I hear them use that kind of language. If they're talking to me and they're like, oh, I ate this and that was bad, or, I'm very quick to be like, time out, let's back up a little bit, let's rewind, let's try that again, and let's actually call the food what it is. It's not good or bad. Food has no morality tied to it. And so think about how many times have you used that kind of rhetoric to describe either the food that you eat or your behavior. We've all heard it. Oh, I was bad today, or I was naughty, or I fell off the wagon, or I'm trying to be good. How often do we hear that in our circles, and how often do we say it ourselves? And how does that make us feel? How does that make us how does that affect our relationship with food? Diet culture creates this illusion that there's this ideal that we should all be searching for. We should constantly be striving for self-improvement. We should constantly be trying to make our bodies look a certain way. There's this constant need for perfection. And this idea of perfection is constantly going to set yourself up for failure because it doesn't exist. If you're constantly striving for perfection, you're constantly going to fail. And because we're human, we're imperfect beings, we're not meant to be perfect. The moment that I tell clients to let go of this unrealistic ideal of perfection, they immediately feel more at ease, more at peace. You can almost just feel the tension start to release from their body. I mean, we don't realize how tense we are when we talk about this stuff or the effect that it has on us. But when we're able to let that go and let ourselves be, it's really, really powerful. Diet culture doesn't consider the holistic approach. Nutrition information is often reduced to black and white. But the reality is, nutrition is 50,000 shades of gray. There are so many variables that come together that determine what make us healthy, and food is not the end-all be-all. It's not some savior that is going to deliver us health. It's one small piece of the puzzle. As a matter of fact, 75% of our health is made up of social determinants of health. And what I mean by this are variables that we have little to no control over. It's where we live in our environment. Do we have access to healthcare? Do we have access to well-paying jobs, education, food security, poverty, violence, safe neighborhoods in order to move our bodies? One of my favorite therapists says that it's your zip code that determines your health more than your genetic code. So there are these variables that are so often not within our control that have a much bigger impact on our health than food, nutrition, moving our body, not drinking alcohol, etc. That, not to say that that's not important, but there's such a much bigger piece of the puzzle, and when we can zoom out and take a look at the whole picture, again, it takes some of that pressure away of having to be perfect and giving ourselves space to be human, and also gives us space to be more compassionate to ourselves. Diet culture also holds us all up to this elusive standard without recognizing that everybody and every body is different. Look at dogs. They come in all shapes and sizes. Some are big, some are medium, some are really small. We don't try to change them, right? We don't take the big dogs and try to make them small dogs. We love them as they are, and we take care of them just the same, no matter what shape and size they are. In this instance, we're no different than dogs. We all come in all different shapes and sizes, and regardless of that, we need to take care of ourselves. We need to feed ourselves regardless of movement. We need to move in a way that feels good and feels joyful. We love our dogs without having to change them or make them something they are not. And that's exactly what we have to do with each other and ourselves. I think it's really important that we redefine food to get out of this reductionist black and white thinking and start to dismantle the restriction that diet culture places on us. So when we think about food, especially in the context of athletes or people who are active, food is often considered as fuel. And while food is certainly fuel, that's not the only thing it is, but that's often the context we only hear about it. Nutrition is not just about science. Nutrition is able to tell a story, and we all have stories around the food that we eat and the food that we share around and through food. Think about it. One thing that we say all the time, or I hear all the time, is I'm an emotional eater. Well, we're all emotional eaters because food is very emotional. When we were babies and we were upset or crying, what did our mothers do in order to comfort and soothe us? She would feed us. Food is very comforting, it's soothing, it's within our biology to feel comforted by food. But diet culture often demonizes it. We shouldn't eat emotionally. We shouldn't eat our feelings. And while, yes, we should have a variety of tools in our toolbox to help cope with our feelings, but food can definitely be a resource. I'm thinking about being away from my family during this pandemic. COVID-19 has prevented me from seeing my family since Christmas of 2019, And so I miss all my family, and especially my mother. And the cool thing about food is that it can keep memories alive and it can keep traditions alive. And so if I want to feel like my mother's in the room, I can cook something with garlic and it immediately smells like my mother. Or if I miss my grandfather who passed away when I was 7 years old, I can cook up a dish that he used to make me and it keeps him alive. That's a very powerful and cool thing, and it has a lot of emotion tied to it. Food is such a big part of our culture. I think about my Italian family and how food is the cornerstone of every meal and holiday and get-together. And while I don't have a lot in common with my family, we can all get together and gather around the table and agree that pasta with pecorino cheese is delicious. So it brings us all together, even though we have all these conflicting beliefs, but food is something that binds us together and it keeps us together after all these years. Food is also a way that we show others that we love them. How many times have we cooked for somebody and put so much of our effort and heart into it in order to show the other person that we care? I think back to a time when I was in high school and we would go over to my grandparents' house every Sunday, and it was my aunts and uncles, and there were like 20 of us around a lazy Susan dinner table, just pushing the food around. And I would eat before I went because my grandmother's food was not healthy enough for me. And what I see now, because my grandmother was not a very, she was loving but in her own way. She wasn't very touchy-feely, huggy kind of person. But the way she showed that she loved us was through cooking for us and through her food. And by not eating my grandmother's food, I was not accepting her love in her language. And so I think back on that now and wish I could go back and show my grandmother how I loved her in her language, in a way that she could understand. When we widen our perspective and redefine what food means to us, we have a more healthy, more celebrated, more positive relationship with food. Nutrition is a relatively young science, and that's precisely why nutrition is so confusing at times. It hasn't had the hundreds or thousands of years for the best research to emerge. For example, the macronutrients, which are fat, carbohydrates, and protein, they weren't even discovered until the mid-1800s. Vitamins weren't discovered until the 1900s. Compare that to the start of chemistry, where metals were first recorded in 1200 BC. Right? There's quite a big learning curve there. But the good news is that nutrition science will eventually grow up. But people want new and exciting and innovative information about foods that will magically give them the health advantage that they want and help them live forever and be bigger, better, faster, stronger right now. And that's why markets are constantly stretching the findings of small research studies, because they have to keep it interesting. Because the same old boring nutrition information of eat everything and balance and move your body is boring. And frankly, it won't get me Instagram followers and a book deal or a TV show appearance. But just like everything in life, the diet pendulum is constantly swinging. So if you think about back in the early 90s, I call it the Snackwell era. Remember those Snackwell cookies that were low fat, and everything was low fat back in the early 90s? Eggs were bad, fat was bad, everything was low fat. And then fast forward to today, where fat is back and eggs are good. And that pendulum is just constantly going to be swinging. And so rather than get dizzy by going back and forth, make sure that you're just staying steady right down the middle, because the truth is that nutrition is not going to drastically change. The basis is set, and so there's not going to be this remarkable new discovery that's going to change what's best for our bodies. And so when things move just drastically from one side to the other, take a step back and really look at it and think about it, instead of being like, oh, now I have to turn this exactly the other way, and just look how that pendulum is constantly going to swing. Our friend on this journey of finding peace with food is self-compassion. And self-compassion might sound a little woo-woo, but there's a lot of really compelling research out there on the benefits of self-compassion. And research shows that people with self-compassion have better body image, women engage in less self-surveillance, they engage in less body comparison, place less emphasis on appearance as an indicator of self-worth. There's a lot of benefits with practicing self-compassion. My clients are very compassionate people, but they have a hard time directing that compassion inwards. And so we spend a lot of time cultivating that, because when we can treat ourselves with more compassion, it takes away a lot of the shame and the blame and the guilt that's often coupled with disordered eating behaviors. If you're interested in working together because you have struggled with disordered eating, or in recovery from eating disorders, or who have engaged in chronic dieting for most of your life, please don't hesitate to reach out. The easiest way to get hold of me is through my website at mariadelzotrd.com. You can also schedule a free 15-minute discovery call where we can chat about your concerns, and I can tell you how I would possibly be able to help you. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this weekend. It's an honor to be able to share something that I am so passionate about with you. Thank you.